So the meeting is now recorded and broadcasted. So I see Peter is with us, then we start the meeting. A very warm welcome, a very good morning, good day, good evening, wherever you are watching us, to this WWA webinar, Wind Power Around the World. It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you. This webinar has now almost become a tradition. It's the third time that we do the webinar in this format. It's a great pleasure that we have people, experts from around the world, so you will get first-hand information about the status of wind power. Before we start, let me also give you some logistical information. First, I would request everyone to stay muted until you are requested to speak. That is also the case for our audience, of course. If you have any questions, please feel free to type your questions in the chat. We can also then, if there is enough time,
can you hear me, Stefan?
Allow you. Yes, Peter.
I can't hear you.
We'll also be able to allow you to speak at a later point of time. Now, let me mention that this webinar is broadcasted live on YouTube. The recorded webinar will also stay there, so please be aware this is a public event. So whenever you show yourself, whenever you speak, be aware it's public. So in principle, everybody will be able to see that you are there and that you are and what you're saying. Let me also take this opportunity that we are very grateful for our supporters of this specific webinar, in particular Renewable Resources, RE2, and the supporter, the partner of this webinar series is Profequentus, another company. We are very grateful for all the support that we are getting, and for those of you who are interested in becoming a partner of the webinar, please contact us at a later point of time. Now, I would request Peter Ray, the president of the World Wind Energy Association, to speak to our audience. Peter, are you with us now? Peter, I can see you, so if you just speak, then we can hear you.
I hope I now have the speaker up high enough to be able to hear you. Could you just try again?
Peter, we can hear you very well, so please go ahead. Please go ahead and welcome our participants.
Thank you. I'll just get my screen up again. Oh, dear.
Peter, here everything looks perfect, so if you just start the introduction.
Yes, I don't know why, but I've lost the screen.
We can see you very well and we can hear you very well.
Yes, but I can't see anybody. All I can see is a Zoom sign.
But actually, that's not so, doesn't matter really. Everybody can see you. So if you just go ahead to welcome our participants, I think that's...
Yes, well, without being able to see what I'm saying or doing, can I say to everybody who's joined us for this Markets Around the World, the wind power generation component of the rollover to renewables is, I think, going extremely well, notwithstanding some of the problems which we have, which are interfering significantly with the way in which we can peacefully develop renewable energy. But leaving that to one side, I think the way in which the renewable energy side, and in particular the wind energy, is something which is to be the credit of a large number of countries of the world and a large number of the people of the world. The situation in Australia is one where I think we've got some quite exciting things happening, some quite exciting things in Europe, some quite exciting things in the United States. And I want to give an example of each of those as we start this discussion, presentation of the story from 17 countries which are represented in this webinar. So one of them is Australia, where we've got a very exciting thing happening, not so much in wind, but in solar, but in the development of renewables, where in the Northern Territory, there's to be a huge solar farm, which will be exporting, not only will be producing not only enough for the Northern Territory added requirements, but also to export to Singapore by a very lengthy cable. And that's something which is part of this integration of the development of renewable energy around the world. And it brings Australia and that part of Asia together to in the world of renewable energy. As well as that, we've got a significant number of hydrogen plants being prepared, and that may be able to link with the hydrogen plants which are being developed in the EU with a new method of being able to produce hydrogen, which is a fraction only of the cost which has been involved in producing green hydrogen. As well as that, we have a lot of potential offshore development of wind, and there's a lot of planning going on there with the Blue Economy Group involved. And then in the wind area, I'd just like to show you a map which I hope comes through, which you can see, and in that you can see the areas where there are new wind farms as well as established wind farms being developed in Victoria and South Australia and Tasmania. The map's too big to show you the whole of Australia, but that's where perhaps a large part of it is concentrated. And altogether, when you start looking then at what's happening in the United States, where wind has exceeded nuclear in the contribution to the supply, and of course is much cheaper than nuclear, you get the feel of how the world is developing, how the breakthroughs are taking place, how there's new technology, how there are new systems being developed. And what we face now, I think, is a race to find the cheapest and best forms of renewable energy, of which one will undoubtedly be wind. And so it'll be most interesting for the WWEA members and those others who have joined us in this webinar to be able to hear what's happening in the various countries. And I'll hand over to Stefan after just simply saying a warm welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for joining us. To hand over to Stefan to introduce the speakers. Stefan, would you like to go ahead? And Stefan, of course, is our long-serving original Secretary General and one who drives the organisation, if I may say so, extremely well. And so congratulations to Stefan, as well as a invitation to open the first speak.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this introduction, indeed underlining that the people and governments around the world are understanding more and more the need to switch to renewable energy. We haven't yet touched upon the war which has just started, which also I think brings many more countries to the point that they need to accelerate. Now we want to start with a general introduction of how the world market has developed, and it's my great pleasure that my colleague Jean-Daniel Petelou, who works with us here at the head office in Bonn, that he will be able to present you the world market developments. Jean is in charge of gathering the data, and many of our speakers who will speak later are of course also the information sources. So what you will see now is a kind of summary of the world market before we go looking at certain individual markets. Sean, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan, and welcome everybody around the world. Yes, today I'm going to present a general overview of the wind markets by 2021. I will not go to any specific country because we have all the experts. I will let that to the experts we have today as speakers. But yes, so I will start directly with this chart. In this chart, you can see the global installed capacity every year. In different colors, you will have the different regions. So you can see here clearly how it has grown from 2010, the global installed capacity from almost 200 gigas to now 838 gigawatts. You can see here in blue, is dark blue, we have Asia, so market mainly driven by China and India, where you can see here by 2021, the total installed capacity in Asia was 406 gigawatts. That's almost half of the total installed capacity worldwide. Then following, you have here in orange what is Europe, which to 225 gigas. Then we have North America with 149 gigawatts installed by 2021. And then smaller regions here, Latin American, where you can see has actually grown during the last year, mainly driven by Brazil and Chile and Mexico. So in this chart, you can see here the total installed capacity has reached 838 gigas after a record year in 2021. So my next chart is actually about the new installed capacity every year. So you can see here, last year was very similar to 2020, but it's another record year with 95 gigawatts installed in 1 year. You can see here that, of course, most of the capacity comes again from China. And then in the rest of the regions, it's more or less the same installed capacity as previous year, a little bit less in the US. You can see here that now we have reached this. We hope that through the next year, we don't go down anymore or down under the 90 gigas installed every year. So you can see here the total installed capacity in 2020, the new installed capacity in 2021 was 95 gigawatts in a year. We also hope that regions like in Africa and Latin America have bigger growth rates during the next years. So we hope this picture change a little bit and we have more a bigger share in other regions than Asia, of course. Now, in this chart, this is my final chart today. Here you can see this is a new installed capacity in 2021. There is a mistake here, actually, in the title. It's 2021. So you can see here, 55% of the whole capacity came from China. Then we have rest of the world with 18. This is top 10 countries plus rest of the world. So you can see here, the rest of the world, it has almost 18% of the share of the new installed capacity. Just some remarks. Sweden has a very good year with over 2 gigas to 2,171 megawatts installed in a year. And then there's another country which I would like to remark now is Vietnam in Southeast Asia with over 2 gigas also installed in a year. So these are the two main markets besides the top 10 countries that I will have to remark. So most of the countries we have here, we will have presentations today, so you will hear more from the experts regarding each of these specific countries. So these tables will be available or will be updated, all the charts on our website very soon after this webinar. So you will have the right information from also all the countries with the full table of countries where you can go to any specific country and see the installed capacity table like this one. So this will be updated after the webinar and it will be available online. So if you want to find any specific country, you can go there and see everything. So with that, I will leave it like this, just because we have all the experts today. So I wish you enjoyed the webinar today and I give back the floor to you, Stefan.
Yes, thank you very much, John. So we see now what is already possible on the global scale. I think we have at the moment a share of wind power in the global power demand of around 7%. Some countries have substantially higher shares. Spain, Germany, Denmark, Uruguay, they've reached 20, 30, some 40% and more. So wind power has reached the mainstream and is a main pillar of the power supply throughout the world. I'm very pleased that we're starting now from the east going to the west, that we have Andrew Bray with us, who is chairing the Australian Renewable Energy Alliance. And Peter already introduced a bit the situation about Australia. Now we can go into detail. Australia, for me, always an amazing example how the citizens are driving renewable energy development in a country where there is also strong fossil interests, obviously. So, Andrew, a great welcome to you, and we look forward to hearing from you how the Australian wind energy market has performed.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and good morning to good morning in Europe, but or good afternoon wherever other people are in the world. Yes, yeah, you're exactly right, Stefan. It's we're actually in the middle of a federal election campaign at the moment, so and I'm pleased to be able to say that we have our federal elections every 3 years, and 3 years ago we had almost the same arguments from the people opposing, action on climate change. And in 2019, they really did make some headway. In 2022, they're starting to sound a little bit silly, and certainly don't want to get ahead of myself, but it looks as though, in general, the public discussion around climate action in Australia is such that people want to see it go ahead, and we may well see that reflected in the ballot in 3 weeks. But anyway, that's a digression. So wind energy in Australia over the last year, it's a similar trajectory, I'd say, to what Jean outlined for the rest of the world. We actually had quite a good year in Australia this year, following on from a strong one the year before. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a second. Just in terms of Renewable Energy Alliance, we're I'm not sure where we'd sit in the sort of international context, but certainly in Australia, we're unique in that we're a not-for-profit group. We sit outside industry, and we're particularly interested in advocating for the renewable energy transformation, but in a way that delivers for the regional communities where so much of the wind and solar is being built. So the general, and here I'm drawing on some figures that the Clean Energy Council, the Australian peak body for renewable energy, provides in their annual Clean Energy Australia report. So I do want to acknowledge their excellent work in this regard. So to look at this this diagram on the left, annual electricity generation in 2021. Renewables now makes up well over 30% of our total electricity generation, which is it's been quite a dramatic rise just in the last few years. We had a federal renewable energy target that targeted a 20% share of renewable energy by 2020. And that was actually cut down in 2015 and reduced. But instead, what we've seen is that industry has really cracked on with the job and installed a lot of renewable energy. Rooftop solar is a really big part of our energy generation, and I think it's almost world leading in the proportion of households that have renewable energy. Rooftop solar. But overall, renewables now produces about 32.5% of our total electricity. And coal has dipped for the first time probably the first time below 60% of our generation. So the transformation is really on. There's no doubt about it. Turning to the makeup of that renewable generation on the right-hand side here, wind is clearly the largest contributor to our supply at 35.9%, which is around about constant from last year. After that, as I mentioned, small-scale solar, hydro continues to still be well in the mix. And large-scale solar is also starting to grow. So they're really the main sources, but wind is very much stepping out ahead of the others. So this is Australia's counterpart to Jean's international graph before, and as you can see, 2021 really was a bumper year in terms of wind installation in Australia. 1,700 megawatts or thereabouts was installed and switched on in 2021. That followed on from a record year the year before of 1,100. So we're really hitting our stride here in terms of the amount of wind that we're installing every year. And there's a further 3,200 megawatts that is either being built at the moment. Some of it's actually basically been built. It's just being its final commissioning is occurring, or there's also some in this list that have been financially committed and will commence construction this year. But nevertheless, it's still, I think we can expect that we're going to see 2021's total exceeded again in 2022. And it's worth noting actually that this is the list of the projects themselves. We're starting to get some quite large wind farms here. 532, the Stockyard Hill wind farm in Victoria, one of the Australian states, has been constructed and is going through final commissioning at the moment. But that's quite a large project. Rye Park, which is actually not far from me in New South Wales, it's almost 400 megawatts. So, as with the international trends, we're moving up into 5 megawatt, 6 megawatt turbines, onshore wind turbines. And so that's meaning the capacity of these wind farms is growing quite significantly. So I'm not going to talk for too long, but having gone through the numbers, I'll just mention a couple of current issues that we're seeing in Australia. Australia is quite a small market. We didn't even make it onto that chart that John had before, but nevertheless, I expect a number of the themes will be ones that you're possibly also finding in your countries. So the biggest barrier going forward is probably transmission, where at the moment we're above 30% renewables, and both parties are going to this election looking at something in between 70 and 80% by the renewables by the end of the decade. So that's a huge amount of new solar and wind capacity. And in general, it's being built in regional Australia, and we have transmission going to some of the areas, but there's going to need to be a lot of new transmission built to plug in that new generation. So getting that transmission built is essentially the big challenge that the renewable energy industry faces. Partly that's being held back by a lack of federal coordination for the regulatory support for that build out, but we're seeing that state governments are actually leading the way really in terms of the new development. So they're actually coming up with their own regulatory frameworks to support the building of these new transmission lines. From our point of view, we spend a lot of time advocating around community outcomes from renewables and transmission. So we're quite glad to see that the payments, for instance, that go to landholders who host transmission lines are being increased. So that's a very welcome development. And a lot of the new developments are being concentrated in renewable energy zones. And again, that's a factor of the transmission issue. If you build a new transmission line from a load centre out to places where it's generated, you want a lot of wind and solar at the end of that line. And so that spot around the end of the line is what we're calling renewable energy zones. So we're needing to work through ways in, particularly in the planning section, that we can have a lot of wind and solar and transmission and batteries all in the same areas. Large scale batteries. I mentioned these in my presentation last year, and we're really starting to see them kick in now. And in fact, just today I noticed there was what we've called a big battery in Victoria, which is a 350 megawatt battery, I think it is. Has been installed by the French company Neoen, and it was dispatching 200 megawatts of storage in the middle of the day today to keep keep the lights on. So we're starting to see a lot of these battery projects actually start being built, and they're generating and storing. So that's very exciting, and also supplying a lot of the grid services and system stability services that we need now that the coal is moving away. So we're seeing an acceleration of the coal closure timetable in Australia. It's a bit sporadic and uncoordinated because, again, the federal government's not prepared to step in and actually guide this process. We would really like to see something like what Germany has around coal closure, because in particular that looks after coal communities and workers in those areas, and that's something that we're not really addressing properly here. But having said that, if by the end of the decade we're at 80% renewables, we may actually end up closing our coal quicker than what Germany's looking at. So, swings and roundabouts. And I've mentioned the election. So if I've got any more time, Stefan, I'm very happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew. That is, I think it's always encouraging to hear about this really dynamic development in Australia. What I find, I think, is very interesting is the role that battery storage plays. I think you are one of the world leaders, because suddenly we don't talk about kilowatt hours, but we talk about megawatt hours of storage capacity in form of batteries. That's certainly where the world is watching how that is working. We have indeed a question here for you, Andrew, and that is related to small wind. Actually, we have also separate events, of course, on small wind, but maybe you also aware about the small wind development in Australia. You have any figures in mind that you could answer this? Is small wind playing a role in Australia? Small wind usually defined as up to 100 kilowatt machines.
Yeah. Look, I'm probably not the best person to answer it, Stefan. I really haven't followed it very closely. But to my knowledge, I don't think that it is. And it's possibly to do with the amount of space that we have, so that, there just hasn't been much of a call for it. And given the much higher sort of capacity that you get out of capacity factors you get out of larger machines, we just haven't really turned to the small scale market. And also probably rooftop solar just is so ubiquitous here that and the level of sunshine you get even in the southern part, most southern part of Tasmania, is still going to be better than a lot of places in Europe. So I think the drivers for small scale wind have probably not been the same. You do find small scale wind in the off. There are people living in the country who are have their own off-grid systems where they'll have hybrid solar and wind. So I think that that's happening, but I wouldn't say it's a large part of our mix.
Yeah, thank you. And Andrew, I mean, we certainly will cover this area in a separate event later this year, but thank you for giving us an idea of where we are. I don't see any other questions here. So this, again, thank you, Andrew. And well, for you, I think it's evening, so please stay with us in case there are other questions coming up. Otherwise, of course, you have a nice evening. And now it's my pleasure to welcome our next speaker. That is Mr. Yugi Yong from the Chinese Wind Energy Association. China, of course, being an exceptional market when we look at the global developments. Shan already kind of indicated the market share of the Chinese market as part of the global market. It's been a great pleasure working with our colleagues from the Chinese Wind Energy Association now for more than, it's around 20 years now. Unfortunately, the pandemic situation has made it a bit more challenging to meet in person, but we're very pleased to have you here. Good afternoon to probably Beijing, and we look forward to hearing from you about the Chinese wind market performance.
Thank you, Stefan, and good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. And because of the academic situation, we work at home sometimes, and but fortunately, I'm in office today, so we are looking forward for the back to normal as soon as possible. Just because we have finished the statistics of the annual installation for Chinese wind numbers. So it's really a job because of the vast numbers of figures. So I'm just, I'm very happy to take this time to update the status of Chinese wind market here. Just now, as Jan Peter mentioned, in last year, China's newly installed capacity of wind power has reached 55 gigawatts, and including offshore wind, about 15 gigawatts. So by the end of last year, Chinese cumulative installed capacity of wind power has exceeded 346 gigawatts. And the cumulative installed capacity of onshore wind is about 220 gigawatts, including 25 gigawatts offshore wind. So, I'd like to highlight here is that last year, it's a big year for Chinese offshore wind turbine manufacturers. They made the first travel for the overseas. It's about 325 megawatts offshore wind turbines. So, and totally, the Chinese exports wind turbines about 3,268 megawatts to 13 countries. And also, this picture highlights the capacities for Chinese wind turbines. We look at the wind turbines is getting bigger and bigger, and for the average capacity is about 4 megawatts. And for onshore wind today, the newly installed capacity is about 4 to 6 megawatts, and for the offshore wind, it's about 8 to 10 megawatts in large scales and small scales. And 12 megawatts turbines has produced, prototype has produced. And the 16 megawatts is also in R&Ds. And last year, the Mingyang and LCIC, the two big manufacturers, has launched their 16 megawatts. And hopefully the prototypes for the 16 megawatts will be installed next year. And also we see the technology route is also changing. For the market share of medium speed, we call it semi-direct drive in Chinese. This kind of technology route is growing. The share of the turbines is growing within the 3 years very quickly. It's among about 10% of them, and we still see it's getting bigger and bigger, especially for offshore wind turbines. And also in last year, we see there are 17 OEMs have new installation records. And even though we have bigger ones, but we see the total numbers of the OEMs is getting fewer. So maybe 2 years ago, we have 20 or 28, but now we only have 17 OEMs. That means it's becoming more concentrated. And also we have quite a big number of developers and site owners, but it's also very concentrated. So for the first of the top 15, they occupies the share, they accounts for the share of about 70% of the total in terms of new installation and total installations. Also, we see for the offshore wind, the ability of transportation, installation, and cable line has been greatly improved. We found last year more and more cable line ships, the vessels and installation vessels put into use, get into the market to ease the tension of the capacity for the installations. So for the offshore wind industry, not only they becomes a major means for the carbon reduction, also becomes a important engine to drive the coastal region's economy. And also we see from the very north to the south till Hainan Province, the coastal regions, all the coastal regions have their own provincial 14th five-year plans for offshore wind. Take it for example, for the Shandong province, previously, maybe 1 year ago, Shandong province has no plans at all for offshore wind. But this year, they launched the 14th five-year plan very clearly and have formulated several industry parks. Here identifies for the 5 bigger ones. They are going to establish the industry change. And also Jiangsu province. Jiangsu has the biggest one for offshore wind, and also the first one to install the offshore wind farms in China. And also have the most complete industry chain for the offshore wind. And also we see Zhejiang province. They also formulated 2 bigger destinations for investment and for the industry parks. And also Fujian. Fujian have very best the wind resources, and also they have very ambitious plan for the offshore wind. But because the resources and also because of the conditions were very complicated. So in the 14th five-year plan, they don't have much bigger target, but in the long run, it's quite big potential for them. And also quite familiar, everybody quite familiar with the Guangdong Province. They have the eastern and western industry chains and industry parks. And especially for the western ones, like in Yangjiang City, they have the home port for the vessels and for the O&Ms. And maybe in a longer range, it will cover a bigger range like to the Vietnam and to the Southeast Asia. And also, I'd like to mention here is the Guangxi Province. It's another new market for Chinese offshore wind power. And the last one is Hainan Province. Also, as previously, Hainan didn't have any offshore wind, but for this year, they have formulated the quite clear target for offshore wind for the 14th five-year plan and also for the next 10 years. And also, they have formulated the 2 wind parks in the north and in the southwest. So, looking ahead, if we want to reach the carbon peak and the carbon neutrality, we have to get about 78% by 2050, including wind and solar. So we'll have to move faster than ever. For example, like for the decentralized wind power, previously we don't have much decentralized wind power. So far we only have 2 gigawatts for the decentralized wind power in China. Most of them are centralized, bigger ones, large scale wind bases. So in the next 5 years, the new decentralized wind power will about 50 gigawatts. It's a bigger, it's ambitious plan for China. And also in the next 5 years, the newly installed capacity for large wind power bases will exceed 150 gigawatts. So most of them will also still lay out in the west and the north of China. And also for the offshore wind, we'll have a target is about 30 gigawatts, and to make the total exceed to 54 gigawatts. Obviously, we will exceed this target. I think the offshore wind will make much faster than ever if we could make the grid parity by 2023. I mean, in the next 2 years. So because for the grid parity is really a great burden for Chinese offshore wind today, because most of the onshore wind can get the grid parity for now. But for the offshore wind, it still have problems. It's still a major task for offshore wind to get the cost reduction. And if we get the right routes and the right measures, then in the next 2 years, we may get the grid parity for most of the coastal regions. But for now, it's only several regions with a bigger, better wind resources could get that. Yeah. But fortunately, hopefully, we find that the turbine price is cutting down very drastically for offshore wind. It's maybe half, just half, about of that of 2 years ago. So we think it's very possible. Yeah, that's it for my introduction. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's been an impressive presentation, and it's really impressive to see the progress. And I think it's also encouraging that with China as being now really one of the big industrial nations, I would say, because one of the biggest industries, of course, of the world we find there is also leading. That also gives hope that the world can achieve also the climate targets, which are closely related to the renewable energy targets. If I may just ask you one question, what is the share at the moment of wind power in the Chinese electricity supply in terms of energy produced?
Yeah, in terms of electricity, it's about 7.8% for the electricity.
Okay, so that is even now, it's now above the global average, which we see at around 7%.
It's still small, yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I see here a question. What about the 3 terawatt target at 2040? Is it confirmed for China? Probably it means that is it an official target? The 3,000. No, it's I think the
Yeah,
3,000
it's
gigawatt target.
it's not an official target by the government. Yeah, but it's a result for the study and consensus for different organizations. So I believe we will get a bigger of that.
I understand that you made an analysis which capacity is necessary to achieve the climate goals, which the Chinese government has officially approved.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good. So I thank you once again very much. And if you also stay with us and see whether there are any additional questions for you. Yeah, very impressive to hear about the Chinese performance. Now, my great pleasure to move to the next country. We stay in East Asia, and my great pleasure, a very good, well, it's already evening, to Professor Chuichi Arakawa from Japan. Chuichi, a warm welcome to you as well. And we look forward now to hear about the developments in Japan. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's my great pleasure to present our situation of wind power from Japan, but it's very difficult to report it just after China has reported. The size is perfectly different from China. So, but anyway, we are very eager to develop now offshore wind. So this time I'd like to report the Japanese market focusing on offshore wind. Can I use my share? Wait a minute, please. Yes. And is it okay? No. Hello? Can you see my PowerPoint slide? PowerPoint?
Sean,
No.
can you assist?
No, we don't see it.
Okay, Martina, please use my PowerPoint from your side, okay?
Okay, I just put it there. You just tell me next and I change the slide.
Okay, thank you very much. This is my first PowerPoint. Yes, the next, please. Now, we have, you can see the new data of wind power capacity in Japan, the end of the last year. Yes, you can see the graph in the right-hand side, 2021, just new installation is 150, something like that. It's very small, unfortunately. You can see the exact number. Now, total cumulative total capacity is now in Japan 4.5 gigawatt, not 400 something like that in China, just for 4 gigawatt. But the new installation is 143 megawatt. It is our pity to report it. Now we are very eager to develop offshore wind, but it's a kind of under construction. Now that for the time being, the total accumulation of onshore wind is very important. But we have so many problems such as social acceptance, grid connections, and so on. So even now, the new capacity is very small, 140 megawatts, something like that. Next, please. Yes, you can see the historical trend in Japan, but we don't like to prepare the update one because last data is 443, but now 450, something like that. Of course, our country, Japan, is not listed in the top 10 or top 20 for the time being now. Okay, next, please. You may know that in Japan, once we say renewable energy, it means photovoltaic. Yes, just photovoltaic. Wind power is very small. Of course, photovoltaic is now 71 gigawatt, maybe the second or third position in the world, big size. But unfortunately, wind power is just 4 gigawatt. Okay, next, please. Of course, we have a very, very excellent technology for wind power, especially marine engineering and something like that. And this is our first offshore floating projects by Ministry of Environment, not METI, not Industry Ministry, Environment Ministry. But this project has started around 10 years, for the last 10 years, but now this project is selected as the first offshore wind farm in the tender and the new act for General Sea area. In Nagasaki Prefecture, Goto project, it's a very excellent one. Next one, please. Now, the previous Prime Minister, Suga, was very eager to support the renewable society, SDG society. So he pushed the government to have a good target. For example, in 2030, total part is 38% of in the electricity. Big number in our sense. In the former time, just 20%, something like that in 2030. Now 38%. For wind, 5% is the target against 1.7% in the former target. Now 5%, very good number. Thank you very much for the former Prime Minister Suga. Okay, but next slide. The target in to 2050 of the government is not so good in my sense. For example, you can see this figure, renewables. Renewables is just 50 to 60% in 2050. And nuclear keeps a good value, 30 to 40% in the future. It's a little difficult to explain. Of course, we push the new government to accept the renewables 100%, something like that. But for the time being, the government think about the 50 or 60% coming from renewables. It's a big problem in our sense. Okay, next please. The group of the industry, wind power industry group, so-called Japan Wind Power Association, which has a very political power to the government, advised new target to the government several years ago. But now, the minister, Mr. Kajiyama, exactly follows their target, such as 10 gigawatt by 2030, by 2040, 40 gigawatt, 45 gigawatt, something like that. By 2050, 130 gigawatt coming from the wind. It means 30% of total electricity generated by wind. We would like to the government to accept these values for the time being, 30%. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, of course, the government has arranged new acts, new regulations for Offshore Wind Promotion Act. It's good, of course. Now we have the first stage of the auction. And later I will explain the result of the first auction in Japan. But anyway, this is a formal material from the government, but the government always says the similar number here, 2030, 10, 45, but they will aim at a low price, 8 to 9 yen per kilowatt hour. It means around 10 US cent per kilowatt hour. Okay, next, please. But even now, we have some bias of the wind resources. Tokyo is here. The resources of wind power is very small. Tohoku, Hokkaido, and Kyushu in the far area from Tokyo and Osaka, Kyoto area has big potential. So we need to prepare the electric grid. Next, please. Now, the government also now has a good plan to combine these areas through the new developed grid, so-called high voltage DC, sea-bottomed grid systems. But they say more than 10 years will be required for the complete of the grid systems. Next, please. Now, the government prepares some information of promotion area from the local government. You can see so many areas in Japan for the candidate of promotion area in this figure. And gradually, our government is progressing this system using the new act. Yes, next, please. And of course, I assist the government and industry to be involved in the TV program. Then we say offshore wind is a kind of blue ocean in the economics. Please focus on the market of offshore wind as blue ocean, gathering the big money, big technology, and something like that. Okay, next, please. Now, finally, I'm sorry, offshore wind capacity in Japan in 2021, the most updated number, offshore wind. Offshore wind, just 51 megawatt, not gigawatt. It's a big problem. But we have two kinds of offshore wind, port associated area and general common sea area. Now, we are under the exact construction of the port associated area. The size is a kind of medium, not so large, but for general common sea area, now the target area is around 1 gigawatt or something like that. Recently, Mitsubishi Corporation and some electric company has got the right to develop the offshore wind in the promotion area after the first auction. Mitsubishi company collaboration, Mitsubishi, oh, I'm sorry, but this Mitsubishi is different from so-called MHI, Mitsubishi Heavy Industry, a manufacturer of wind turbines and some marine engineering companies, Mitsubishi Trading Company, okay? But anyway, they have caught the chance of big size of offshore wind through the auction. Finally, 1.6 gigawatt from 3 areas, big size. But next slide, please. Now we have, I'm sorry, it's a little different from the exact slide, but we have so many comments or reputations from Japan and world newspapers and magazines. Certainly, Mitsubishi Group quote this one, but even now, still to play for. So, for example, yes, the final part. This is a comment from some Slate executive search or some comment from Elsted. One company joined in the auction. They say this was only the first round auction of fixed bottom offshore wind, and Japan will need know-how, technology, and experience, much of it from Europe. So if it is to reach its goal of having 10 gigawatt and something like that, but they say it's a bit difficult. The government say at first 29 Japanese yen as a cap price, but finally it's just 11 yen for kilowatt. We had a big difference between cap price 30 Japanese yen and 10 Japanese yen per kilowatt. It means it's very difficult to develop new technology, or it's developed to collaborate with the local people. How can they manage this new plan of offshore wind? Anyway, it's now Mitsubishi Group who support the big market of fixed bottom offshore wind. But of course, in future, Japan will invite another players for deep offshore, floating offshore, and something like that. Anyway, it's just first stage of our auction. Although it's a little large, 1.6 gigawatt, just one group of the company, but this is the first stage. We need to invite so many companies, so many groups or the as a player of the offshore wind. Next slide. Yes, it is normal things. Now our government has started scheme of promotion area and published first auction result. But we have some possibility, for example, there is some possibility to extend nuclear power again for the carbon neutral in Japan, because we should cooperate with local people for the development of ocean energy from the viewpoint of social acceptance. But my private idea is that Mitsubishi Group didn't pay strong attention to the social acceptance. So it's a big problem. Of course, now they are managing to get agreement from the local people, from social acceptance, but it's very difficult to do it. So I'm a little afraid. Our future government is going to another scenario in the non-carbon, carbon neutral world. Anyway, our Japan future offshore wind of giant size is expected. Please join us and cooperate with us. Thank you very much. for your kind collaboration attention.
Yes, thank you very much, Chuichi. Great pleasure to hear from you directly. And indeed, I mean, we have to see that some countries are not performing as some they did in some years back. So there's been a lot of change when we see at the ranking of countries around the world. Offshore wind certainly has a big future in Japan as well, and we hope to see, as you said, in the near future, big installation numbers in Japan. I don't see a question for you. There are some two comments here in the chat, which I think are kind of self-explaining. With this, I would say again a great thank you to Tokyo, probably, and please stay with us in case there are other questions coming. And then let's move forward to the next country, again, East Asia, Korea. And it's my pleasure now to welcome Professor Jung-Yul Son, who's been a professor for dealing a lot with wind energy, joining us from Korea. And now, Professor Son, the floor is yours.
Hello. It's very nice to contact all of you. In Korea, it's slowly evening. I think it's European countries slowly the mornings. So before I talking about the situation wind energy in Korea, now we have a very politically different situation. I don't know if someone heard about this new president. Before he elected as president, he didn't know RE100 campaign, but I think it's now he understands this RE100 campaign. And anyway, they try to build a new cabinet and a new president of government association. So I show you this my presentation, which last government took the renewable energy policies. So therefore, I would like to talk just this situation which last government planned for renewable energy, especially wind energy sectors. So, John, can you show my presentation? Okay. So, before my presentation I would like to talk about some report. It is very helpful this situation, the wind energy sector in Korea. The implementation of onshore wind project in Korea has faced a significant challenge to date, primarily due to a lack of a suitable land. That means Korea is more than 70% of my country is mountainous, and a degree of resistance from local communities, with only a handful of such projects having been completed in recent years. So I think it's you quote the last my presentation is the Korea wind energy sector is very slowly developed. So, however, my country is northern and the southern. That means it's Jeolla province present a favorable condition for offshore wind project. And with those areas currently account for more than 90% of offshore wind project in development, and with more than 15 gigawatt of prospective capacity. Otherwise, it's the east side, the Ulsan city, they planned to build or develop is more than 15 gigawatt floating offshore wind farms. But it took a very long time, so we don't know. Now is next new government. They would like to take this project continuously, or they try to develop the more big wind farm or offshore wind farms. We don't know exactly. In February 2021, our government is announced a plan to develop a 48.5 trillion won. That means the 8.2 gigawatt offshore wind project in the Hainan region in South Jeolla Province, which would be the country's largest to date and could put Korea on track to achieving more than 2/3 of its 2030 target of 12 gigawatt offshore wind capacity. The otherwise is in Hainan is the Jeolla province, is considered to have a 12.4 gigawatt, or 37% of the country's total offshore wind resource potentials. The project is split into phase 1 with a 4.1 gigawatt of capacity to be completed by 2025. It's very doubtly. The phase 2 with 2.1 gigawatt of capacity to be completely by 2027. And the phase 3 with a further 2 gigawatt capacity to be completed by 2030. This plan was made, now it's the last government. So please, my presentation, take the page 6. Could you show the page 6? It's now it's Korea. Our wind farm total capacity in 2021 is 1.7 gigawatt. That's onshore sector is 1.6 gigawatt. The offshore is 135 megawatt. So now it's very poor compared with the China or the Japan, but we hope next new government, they should try to continue our renewable policy, and then it's area 100 campaign target. So development plan in the future is a total 48.5 gigawatts. It's onshore sector is 10.5 gigawatt. The offshore is 38 gigawatt. So under the table, I show you already the last many times about these weight factors, onshore and the offshore sectors. We have still now this very good weight factors. Therefore, it's many global company like Esso and Total and Equinor or Northern Power. They try to take the big offshore project in Korea. So next page. So the right side shows is the grid maps. You can see is the red point is the high voltage 765 kilowatt substation, and then is blue one is 345 kilowatt substation. The red line is the 765 route, and the blue one is 345 kilowatt route. So my presentation is like this one. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gidong. That's been very interesting to hear what Korea is doing. Obviously, also not that much progress yet, but with the target that you highlighted of 48 gigawatt as a long-term kind of scenario compared to the existing peak demand, it sounds like the prospects are there, and now it's up to really the deployment. Again, I don't see any questions here directly for you, so please be with us, stay with us, and in case questions are coming up, you may answer them at a later point of time.
Okay.
So a very good evening from this at this moment to Korea, and now let's move further to the west, to South Asia, and it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Jami Hossain, who's been working in wind energy for more than 3 decades now. Jami, we've just organized together the 19th World Wind Energy Conference, which was held in virtual format. It's my pleasure to welcome you and to hear from you about how India is performing. India, of course, has been the second largest market in Asia now for many, many years. Jami, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good afternoon and good day to all the people from different parts of the world, Australia, Japan, and Europe, probably from US, I don't know. So, Stephen, if you can give me the access to share the screen, I can share it from there. Okay, it is there, I think. So, can you see the screen?
Yes, looks good. Perfect.
Yeah. So, I have a relatively smaller presentation, some 8-10 slides, which capture some of the developments in India. And these photographs are generally of the wind farms in different parts of the country. So if you look at the status today of the wind farms in the country, we have something like 40.4 gigawatt of total capacity installed so far. And this data is very fresh, right up to, I think, April 2022. And it seems we have added something like 1100 megawatts in the year 21-22. There's been a slow progress on the installation of wind farms, and I will come to the reasons, some of the reasons of why and how later. But we have had quite a few somewhat large targets for setting up of wind capacity in the country. So initially around 2017 or 2016, we had a target of 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022, which included 60 gigawatt of wind. And today we are 20 gigawatt less what was planned. And also on the solar front, because the remaining capacity, about 100 gigawatt, was supposed to be solar. And we have something like 50 plus gigawatt of solar. So almost 50% of the capacity has been installed. But otherwise, there is some delay. Part of the delay, one can say, would have been due to the pandemic. And the other part could be to the other reasons. The second was a new target of 450 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. And this target was, it came up around the COP26 time. And this is also something that has to be pursued. And it is obvious that, India has a very huge power requirement, which will continue to increase for, development and growth. And the options to increase the power continue to be, diminishing, with very less possibility of setting up new coal projects. Even the existing coal projects or thermal projects have been operating at a lower capacity utilization or plant load factor. And so that being the state, I think more of solar and more of wind has to anyway follow in near future and in reasonable time. The WTG sizes that are finding entry into India now are of the order of 4 to 5 megawatt capacity. There is I think a 4.2 megawatt wind turbine to be installed in Tamil Nadu very soon. One of our business groups, Adani, they have entered into some joint venture to undertake manufacturing of 5.2 megawatt wind turbine, and so the larger wind turbines will find entry into the Indian market. But at the moment, most of the wind turbines are of the size of around up to 2 to 3 megawatt, between the range 2 to 3 megawatt, and some of them are around now coming out to the 3.3, 3.6 megawatt. So that is the status. Hub height, we normally typically have something like from 120 meter to 140 meter, but now even 160 meter hub height is being tried out. And in fact, on wind turbine, I think, as I understand, has been set up at 160 meter hub height, and this is again 3+ megawatt wind turbine. So offshore has been talked about for a long time, and there have been many deliberations within the government and various ministries, because all different kinds of ministries get involved in offshore development. Progress has been somewhat slow, and no projects has come up so far. The latest that I understand is that a couple of demonstration wind turbines will be set up in the south of Tamil Nadu and perhaps in the Gulf of Cambodge. And as you know, India has a very long coastline of 7,500 kilometers. So it's a very large coastline where very significant capacity of the offshore wind farm projects can come up. And this we have to see when and where. There have been new developments on the policy front, like more and more developments of electric vehicles are there. There's a talk of green hydrogen, and this is seen as an important input or a connect with the renewable energy, because it is a sort of a storage that can be used. So this is the overall picture in a nutshell that we have today, as of today. A lot of interest these days in EV and green hydrogen, though no projects have, like that. EVs are there, of course, on the ground. As I said, the progress has been slow. So if you see in 2016-17, these numbers are according to the financial year. So our financial year starts from March to March. So 2016 means till March 2017. So in 2016-17, we had 5,500 megawatt of installation. And before that also, we had a reasonably good capacities of 3,000 megawatt per year, roughly. But as you see, after 2017, the progress has really been slow. So initially, of course, there was a change in the policy framework, and there were the auctions. But yes, those projects have been auctioned, and they are many of them are contractually bound to build these projects, and there is a very large capacity which has been auctioned out. But the targets have been missed, and the progress is slow. And as you can see, that it has really, come to the bottom as far as annual installations are concerned. So all these bars are annual installations in thousands of megawatts here. So this slide just on the lighter side to just indicate what's happening. India has been one of the countries on the top of the wind energy, and we have ranked fourth, and perhaps still we are fourth in terms of the installation. But many other countries have moved very fast. China, for example, and somewhat other countries also. And so there has been a slowdown, and this slide just tends to show that there is a tussle, and there is a sort of a tug of war between arriving at a low tariff for the projects and getting the projects up in some way. So within this, as you see, this is just on the lighter side. And if you look at the total capacity which has been installed so far in India, of all capacities together, is around 400 gigawatt, out of which 236 gigawatt is thermal, 46 is hydro, nuclear is smaller, 6.7. Wind is like 40.4, and solar is 50 something. And so these are the different capacities. But I would like to just show you something additional, which is this, that thermal, though it is 236 megawatt and certain capacity, I mean 60% maybe of the total 400 megawatt. The actual plant utilization of thermal projects is higher. So a thermal megawatt is not same as a wind megawatt or a solar megawatt. So people tend to have this misunderstanding. Okay, if wind is 100 megawatt, it means equal of offsetting the 100 megawatt of thermal. But that is not the case. The real offset happens on the energy front. And if you look at the breakup of total power here in terms of energy that it generates over the year, maybe we have 70 to 80% of energy still coming from the thermal, and maybe 20 to 25% from the rest, which includes solar, wind, everything else, because they operate on a lower plant load factor, which may be roughly 30%, a little more, little less, and like that. And if you look at just for the sake of doing an argument, that if you want to offset all the thermal or fossil fuel based generation with renewable energy, then we will roughly need something like 5 times the remaining capacity to offset thermal. Then it should be around 800 gigawatt or more, and this is based on current consumptions. So by the time this kind of capacity ever comes up, and the consumption will also be higher. But then looking at the future, I think that we have to look at some figures of the order of this size, maybe by 2030 or maybe by 2040, which should be something like 800 gigawatts. Here I have just captured the page of the ministry, and this is for the year 2021. This is as on March 2021, this data, and it shows that the installed capacity in gigawatt is this 40 gigawatt roughly. It was almost similar last year, 39 point something, and this is now 40 point something. So that is the way it is. But as I said, there are a lot of auctions have happened, and a lot of projects have been bid out, and these projects have to be built, because those parties that have went in for the parties that went in for the auctions, they have binding commitments to set up these projects. And there's just a chart which shows all the different capacities which have been auctioned right from 2021 to 2017. And you see the capacities are reasonably large. And these are not only wind, but this is also a new kind of capacity which we call the solar wind hybrid. And this capacity together, in which in the hybrid part, at least 33% or 25% has to be coming from other source, other than wind or other than solar. So in a solar wind hybrid, I mean 66% may be wind, but 33% has to be solar. But if you look at it from 2017 onwards, nearly 28,000 megawatts have been auctioned. So these projects have to be built. Now, out of that, some 3,000 megawatt capacity was cancelled. Those people backed out who wanted to do the project. But 6,300 megawatt has been set up. So roughly, I can say that in future, we should, from these auctions, have 10 to 12,000 megawatts additional capacity coming up, which can come up in 23, 24 period. So I would say by the end of 24, we should have additional 10 gigawatt. But going by the fact that the progress has been slow, and there are many reasons for that. So I will come to that also. If you look at this shows manufacturing wise breakup, and as you can see, Suzlon is 40%. I don't know whether, yeah. So Suzlon is 40%, and the others are there. Vestas is 8.2%, Inox is 11.7%, so on like that. And this over here, sorry. Yeah, so shows different IPPs. So you have Adani here holding 15.5.
Yami, I think you have to.
Jamie, you're muted, so we cannot hear you.
Now you can hear
still
me?
Talking. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I will continue with this because, yeah, I'll just go just a minute because the network kept coming and going. Just a minute. So I think you can hear me. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you can see the presentation, or I have to do it again?
Not anymore.
Okay.
Not anymore.
Okay.
Now it's back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the different IPPs which are there. The large ones are Adani, Renew, and the other companies, and then the smaller ones. And so this is how the investment scenario is there. So just to tell you how the projects are developing in India, after a change in policy from feed-in mechanism earlier to an auctions system, we have an organization called Solar Energy Corporation of India, SECI, which is under the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. And this organization organizes the auctions for the purchase of electricity from different projects, but they are not the owner of the, they are not the buyer of that electricity directly. What the SECI does is it looks for buyers like DISCOMs or like the electricity boards or maybe some other large consumers of electricity. And then it makes a tie-up between the, between the bid winners and the organizations who want to buy this power. And there is a power purchase agreement signed. And so this is more like a tripartite system. So for the projects to happen, the PPA power purchase agreement must be signed. And sometimes there can be a delay in organizing this because these are long-term 25-year PPAs. And SECI can take some time in, fixing this power purchase agreement. So this is one reason possibly for the delay, that it's not because of the problems on the ground, but it is because the contracts that SECI must do with the other parties may take some time. And this can be one reason, but there are of course other reasons which I will come.
So,
Can you hear me?
Cham, yes, if it'd be good if you
First,
can
I will
slowly
quickly
conclude.
Yeah.
Good. Mhm.
So yeah. So as you see, I've shown an earlier slide of a chess game, and you see there is a sort of a tug of war to get a, on the one hand a lower tariff, and on the other hand sort of a project going. And you see the cartoon just depicts that. And the reason for the delays is this kind of situation which has arrived where cost is a major consideration. The cost of the tariff is a major consideration, and the reduced tariff also means a lot of constraints for the developers to do the projects. Then in between, there have been policy changes not necessarily related to wind, but policy changes related to land, for example, in some states. And that has also, delayed the projects. As I have mentioned many times earlier, that there used to be an MSME segment. MSME means medium and small enterprises who are doing quite a few projects earlier. They have almost been made to exit from this business of late because of the auctions where only large players can, play the game. So that is another reason why a lot of projects are not happening, and there is a delay. Lastly, most importantly, is that the DISCOMs, the entities which normally buy this electricity, they have also financial issues, and they have a lot of losses, financial losses, and dues to the generators. There are something of the order of till July 2021, 1.6 billion INR to the renewable energy PP. This is also a very big setback. The IPP is, I won't say setback, but hindrance that they have to get over because this creates issues for them, cash flow issues, if they don't get paid for the electricity generated. So there are some issues like this of different kinds. So while a number of targets have been announced, new policies have been announced for hydrogen and things, and there is a progress or there is a push on the offshore front. On the ground, progress is slow, and let us hope that the question is taken care of this by all the stakeholders. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chami. I think that was very interesting to see how the Indian market is developing. Also here with ambitious targets now, I think with a robust growth, but it should be more obviously to achieve those targets. India, of course, historically one of the first movers, was one of, I think, the first Asian country which had a sizable wind turbine market. Jami, I appreciate in particular, as I think people notice that you're not 100% healthy at the moment, that you still take the time to present India here. I don't see any questions, so if you can still kind of stay with us, and if there are any questions coming up, maybe address them later. So thank you so much, and a good afternoon to Delhi. And we move now to the next country, which is a neighboring country, direct neighboring country, Pakistan. Pakistan, which has started not that long ago to invest on a larger scale in wind energy, has also ambitious targets, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Muhammad Mustafa Amjar, who's been working with our association in Pakistan locally, and a great pleasure to welcome you here and present latest developments from Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Well, first of all, I guess thank you everyone for being a part of this. I guess it is quite important to discuss, and especially after following the Indian market, there is a lot happening in Pakistan, as Stefan said. There is a lot of opportunity for wind power in Pakistan as well, and a lot more needs to be done. So I guess let me delve right into it. Just a brief overview of what I'll be discussing in the next 10 minutes. I'll be starting with a sector overview of Pakistan, where we stand, the shares of different energy sources, and then talk about the resource availability in Pakistan. Then we look into the capacity, the trends, particularly with regards to installments and the costing of renewable energy in Pakistan. Then we look into some policies that are dictating and will probably dictate the growth. And then at the end, we'll look at some of the barriers and drivers of RE growth in the country. So this is kind of where we stand right now. Again, the total installed capacity is somewhere around 35 gigawatts. So Pakistan is still very highly dependent on thermal generation, as is quite evident from the second pie chart. And again, we are still, further delving down the road of investing in local indigenous coal. So that figure of domestic coal is supposed to go up. Our LNG infrastructure is coming up in a few years. So there are some plants that will come online. But at the same time, Pakistan does have some ambitious goals with regards to renewables, both wind and solar. So we do see that obviously the numbers will definitely go up from what we are witnessing right now, around 400 for solar and 1336 for wind. But at the same time, a major chunk of the renewable share is kind of being planned to divert it towards hydro, which is supposed to, rise up almost up to 46% by 2030. So there are some good policy goals, but obviously when it comes to implementation, we still want to see that translated. So let's see how that goes in the coming years. In terms of growth forecasting, the government is quite ambitious with regards to the growth in electricity demand, particularly post-COVID. They're envisioning a 10% increase, but that might not be the case. Electricity is quite expensive in Pakistan, with the tariff almost around 12 cents per kilowatt hour, which is quite high compared to all other perhaps regional countries. But then again, consumption per capita is quite low as well. And we do have a lot of installed capacity. A lot of these projects, particularly IPPs of oil and gas, are laying dormant at the moment as well. This was due to the boom that we witnessed in the previous decade, where a lot of IPPs were were allowed to come online, and that has been a challenge, in terms of capacity payments and whatnot, in driving the cost down of the basket price of electricity in Pakistan. The good thing, I suppose, is that we do have a lot of good resource. theoretically 346 gigawatts, but then again, there are certain regions in Pakistan which are pretty much, very resource rich, particularly the Sindh and the Balochistan province. A lot of the development currently is going underway in Jhimpir and the Gharo region. The Jhimpir Keti Bandar area, the wind corridor is quite important going forward as well. The provincial government is quite ambitious with regards to ensuring that this potential is maximized, but they're also, at the same time, coal is quite heavily located in the same province, and they are kind of maintaining the fine balance of investing both in coal and wind power at the same time. But the good thing is that the load centers, particularly the industrial city of Karachi, Hyderabad, they're quite close to these wind corridors. So down the road, definitely there is a lot of potential of wind energy meeting the demand of these local areas as well. And more so, I guess, even in the Balochistan region, there is a lot of potential of wind energy, and obviously down the lane with investments happening in transmission, a lot more evacuation can take place from those areas as well. In terms of installed capacity for wind energy, we do see a certain stagnation reached between 2018 to 2021. Again, that was due to some policy barriers and some regulatory issues where not a lot of RFPs were issued. And again, Pakistan is shifting from a feed-in tariff to renewable energy auctions mechanism, which I'll go delve into further in the next few slides. But again, things are looking up, particularly with regards to planning. In the next 3 years, almost 3 gigawatts of wind energy has to come online as per the IGCP, which is the Indicative Generation Capacity Expansion Plan, which has been approved by the government. So things are definitely looking up, and hopefully both wind and solar will be taking off, particularly till 2030 at the very least. And yeah, as we see the crisis around, gas and coal, the prices, particularly due to the war of Russia and Ukraine, we are looking at what 20 to 30, cents per kilowatt hour prices around these fuels. So renewable energy is, a very indigenous, a very cheap alternative, and we do envision that these numbers in successive iterations of the capacity expansion plan will definitely go up. In terms of the price reductions of tariff for wind power projects, Pakistan has already, even with the feed-in tariff mechanism, see almost, immense decrease. There has been almost, I think it's somewhere around 70 to 80% decrease in terms of the cost in the past decade. So yeah, we're looking at what 3 to 4 cents of tariffs for wind and solar respectively. So things are looking pretty good on that front. Obviously, I'm not sure if auctions will drive this down further, as is envisioned by the government that through auctions we'll bring that price down further. But nonetheless, we do understand that some of the challenges with regards to the COVID situation and obviously the political situations as well at a global level will impact some of these prices, and we might even see these prices go up in the first round of auctions. But then again, it's still speculative on that front. So I mentioned the DRE policy and the IGCP document initially as well. The DRE policy is quite ambitious for Pakistan, given that we currently are looking at what 4 to 5% of renewable energy in the mix. So it sets very ambitious targets of 20% by 2025 and 30% by 2030. One change that has happened in the last year or so was the fact that Pakistan added hydro to the definition of renewables and changed the target to almost 60%. So what the IGCP, which is the capacity expansion plan, did was that it went with almost 46% hydro, and that kind of reduced the share of VRE to 21% by 2030. But again, it is expected that successive iterations of this plan might, change this for the better. And hopefully we'll get back to the original target, which is 30% by 2030. So yeah, a lot of advocacy is going on that front as well, and we might see things look up over there. As I mentioned earlier as well, some things that the IGCP has dictated is the capacity additions. So over the next 3 years, we are going to, see almost 3 gigawatts of wind and solar both coming on. And I do talk in further detail about the year-in breakdown of the different additions that are dictated by the IGCEP. So again, since RE inductions are going to be done through auctions, it presents Pakistan with a great opportunity to, maximize the utility of this auctions mechanism and not only limit it to drive down the price. So almost 10 gigawatts of renewables, both wind and solar, have to come online by 2030 as per the capacity expansion plan. And the mode of procurement will be a steady yearly basis of auctions. So 1 gigawatts almost for the first 3 years. We do see solar being preferred here, but there are also some considerations by I guess again political issues are a challenge, but the last government were considering looking into hybrid modes of both wind and solar projects. So that was also a discussion that was happening, but again, we just had a change in regime. We were just going to have a new energy minister. Actually, it was announced yesterday. So we're still awaiting a bit on how the policies of the new government will look into these challenges. But again, like I said, it's a great opportunity for Pakistan to maximize the utility of these auctions mechanism and ensuring that at least, RE developers are promoted, socioeconomic dispersion can take place, local markets can be developed. And all of these kind of align very well with the ARE policy goals that Pakistan set out in the ARE policy, which said quite explicitly that we want to, increase the share of green energy in the overall mix, make sure that every power generation that comes online is least cost. ARE auctions, through auctions, they wanted to fast track and have a transparent procurement mechanism. We are also looking at an open market, a competitive trading market for Pakistan as well. So that is also something that is being planned by the regulator. Local manufacturing ranks quite highly for Pakistan. So, capacity and technology transfer is also something that the government will facilitate in the coming years. And like I said, these are ambitious targets for Pakistan, but nonetheless, we do want to see them translated. Little by little, I believe the auctions mechanism are going to come online. There are a few documents that the regulator has been sending out periodically on what is going to be the mechanism of these auctions. So things are looking a bit good on that front. Documents are coming out, regulations are coming out, and hopefully we intend to have the first round of auctions later in this year as well. So that is a positive, happening on the wind and solar front for Pakistan. The last slide that I've initially referred to as well, it's always good to look at what are the drivers and barriers for RE deployment. So Pakistan, like I said, renewable energy is pretty much the cheapest option right now. It is the least cost option. Pakistan is moving towards an indigenization of the energy, mix drive. So they're doing it through coal, through local coal, through again maximizing utility of hydropower plants, and then wind and solar. So that drive will continue, given the fact that the prices of RLNG and coal have skyrocketed as well. So pretty much similar to how the European markets are perceiving it right now. Pakistan is also looking to ensure that they do not have to depend on imported fuel, and that means that renewables will definitely serve as a good alternative to it. Like I mentioned, there is a good resource available in Pakistan. There are some challenges with regards to capacity payments that kind of help ensure that renewables can be preferred. And then I guess this is also quite important that the off-grid and distributed generation market is pretty nascent. It's still developing. Pakistan does have remote areas where, they have good resource of both the renewables, wind and solar, and we do see that there is a lot of potential of almost 20 to some various estimates put it around 20 to 30% of the population is unserved in terms of grid connectivity. So there's a lot of potential for off-grid and distributed generation systems. Again, bilateral market is also something that can be explored, since Pakistan is moving towards a competitive market system. So bilateral trading of renewable energy and projects will also take off in the coming years. In terms of barriers, again, like I mentioned, a lot of plants are sitting idle with regards to IPPs. Although at the moment it doesn't make sense to make them operational, and it still might even be feasible to set up a renewable plant altogether and generate electricity from it in the longer run. But obviously we do have the surplus capacity available. Coal and RLNG are still in the pipeline, some of them under the CPEC. Again, RLNG infrastructure is coming online, 2 RLNG terminals are planned. So again, long-term contracts are sought out. So if that materializes, you know, it would definitely impact the growth of RE. And then obviously policy delays and mismatch is a challenge. The IGCEP was supposed to be, you know, accompanied by a TCEP, a transmission system expansion plan, which is still awaited. Again, the IGCEP, the approval of the IGCEP in itself required 3 to 4 iterations. So there is a lot of, you know, challenges with regards to the issues of policy. And like I said, the RE policy dictated 30% VRE and then changed the goalposts a bit by adding hydel to it. And now we're looking at what, 21% by 2030. And obviously political instability also plays a role in all of this. We just had a regime change, after 3.5 years. So again, the next government will have 1.5 years if it is allowed to continue. So that means that we'll have elections in the next year or so as well. So yeah, that kind of does impact investor confidence. But at the same time, we are pretty hopeful that obviously the RE policy 2019 will still remain intact. Although we do have, the current government might have the tendency to, you know, further delve into RLNG contracts and to ensure that, you know, long-term supply agreements are ensured. So yeah, that might be a challenge. But yeah, overall things are looking pretty good, but there are obviously lots of inherent challenges that Pakistan is facing.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that was an excellent presentation covering really all the important aspects. And I think what is most encouraging is to see how cost competitive wind energy is now in Pakistan. We are, of course, a bit worried about now the potential disruption. We just heard from India that the introduction of auctions has led to some problems. We will hear a bit later that we had a similar impact in Germany. And now, as it's so important, when you talked about today's power prices from conventional power sources, we hope that that can be managed in a way that the wind sector in Pakistan can flourish also in the near future. Not only for the wind power sector itself, but for the country and also from a global climate perspective, that is essential. So Muhammad, again, thank you so much. I don't see questions here for you right now. If you just also have a look at the chat here, in case anything pops up. Otherwise, again, thank you and a good afternoon to Islamabad. And I would then go to our last speaker for this first part of our wind power markets overview session. And that is Gadi Hareli, who is chairing the Israeli Wind Energy Association. Gadi, welcome to you as well. I know you're having some internet connection issues, so we hope that the connection stays stable while you are with us. A warm welcome to you as well, and I would hand over the floor to you.
Thank you, Stefan. And I understand that I have -1 minute to talk about this.
Well,
the situation.
Fortunately,
in Israel.
we have break as a next item, so you have your 10 minutes as discussed.
I'll try to make it short. Just let me try and share my screen. Can you see the presentation?
It's coming. It's not yet shown.
Or alternatively, if you want, I sent it by email. Maybe you share it and I'll just...
Yeah, it's now visible, so you can just start in case there is another issue here. Okay. Then Sean may show it.
So,
I suggest you go to presentation mode that we see only the main slide.
Like this.
Yeah, very good.
Okay. So, not a lot of change specifically for wind energy. Generally speaking, Israel is mostly focusing on solar. That has been described in previous meetings. General data and updated targets are presented here for Israel, targeting 30% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. And again, as I mentioned, most of it is solar. There are some good news, however. We just this is the current status of most of the installations of renewable energy, which are mainly photovoltaics. There has been progress. We now have the Enlight wind farm of roughly 100 megawatt wind farm that has been connected to the grid. Celebrations here were taken last month for the connection of this wind farm to the grid. There are a few wind farms which are still in the pipeline, separated by this line which I put in here. So generally speaking, we're not doing very well with wind energy in a similar manner as in the past. This is the wind farm of Emek HaBachar, and these are the older wind farms which have been operational for a few years now. In the northern, all of them are in the northern part of Israel. Most of the activities we're currently, I'm also working with Ministry of Energy here, so we're looking for the possibilities of energy production offshore. Wind is not a very good alternative, unfortunately, also for offshore in Israel, at least, as you can see here from the map on the wind conditions are not really that good, pretty marginal. So most of activities are directed into dual use of land for photovoltaics. Huge activity was finalized 2 months ago for dual use with agriculture. So that is integration of photovoltaics with agriculture. And I think here you can see a summary of the activity. These are pilot projects which integrate the landowners as well as the entrepreneurs who are initiating the activity, and together with researchers from different institutions all over the country, as well as cooperation with international companies from abroad. So this is on one hand, and at the same time, since the source is mostly going to be from photovoltaics, perform them on the issue of storage. So these are some examples. Office of the Ministry of Energy related to storage, not necessarily for electricity, but compressed storage activities and projects of energy, thermal energy storage. Nostromo, who is has developed, and we have some projects of cooling, chilling of and new technologies for battery storage, companies like Energy and gen cells, fuel cells. I think that would be, to make it brief.
So, Gadi, I'm not sure whether you have now, I think we've lost you. Are you still with us? I see you're not connected here, but I understand that you were
I
about
realized that,
to come to the conclusion. Gadi, please.
yeah, so the bottom line, I'm not sure at which we disconnected. But the bottom line is that wind energy has has pretty good potential, but so many objections over here that it cannot get the focus, and mostly it's photovoltaics with storage and dual use.
Yes, well, thank you very much. When we look at the installation numbers, there is we see some progress. Of course, Israel is also a small country, but of course, we all hope that also in Israel there will be more installations in the future, and that the full potential can be used in order to reach that renewable energy supply that we all need. So, I don't see any questions for you. If there are any questions, please now. Otherwise, I would like to come to the conclusion of this first part of our webinar. Thanks a lot to all our speakers, which have contributed, I think, excellent first-hand information about the wind power markets from where they are. As I also already wrote in the chat window here, the webinar is broadcasted on YouTube, and you will also have the opportunity of watch all those speeches again in our YouTube channel. At the moment, I would say thank you, and we will then come to the break and continue in what is 1:30 p.m. Central European Summertime, which would be from now on in 80 minutes. We will leave the meeting here open, but stop for the time being, of course, the live broadcast. With this, again, thanks a lot to our speakers of this session, and we will continue, as I said, in 80 minutes from now.